Hello, and welcome to our lesson on crisis management. This segment will continue discussing emergency planning in projects. Security is an important issue for a disaster committee to consider, since interference from unwanted elements can exacerbate a crisis or interfere with its management. This involves identifying external constituencies who feel that they have a stake in a crisis's outcome but who cannot contribute to its solution. Those involved in crisis management efforts should be insulated from these disruptive elements so they can develop a strong focus on the problem. In some situations, it is also important that the site of a crisis is physically cut off from these elements, particularly when it continues to represent a danger to the public. In such situations, evacuation procedures are implemented, and it is essential that they are clearly communicated to everyone on a project and reinforced by regular training and mock drills. Developing a culture of collective responsibility. One way of developing a culture of collective responsibility is to communicate everyone's interdependency during a crisis and to clarify and share project risks as much as possible. Most crises demand an injection of extra resources into a project, and if the disaster committee does not identify their source in advance, then a crisis will stimulate negotiations and potential conflicts that will delay a response. Public relations. Public relations are an essential aspect of crisis management, since most types of crises have implications beyond an organization's boundaries. In essence, the three publics that need to be involved in a crisis are employees not directly affected by it, external and quasi-external interest groups, and the general public. The media managers cannot rely upon the media to put their case, and a continued reluctance to communicate with the media will certainly lead to negative reporting of the industry's activities. Open relationships with the press and more sensitivity to environmental issues enable managers to better shape the public's attitudes and obtain a more balanced presentation of the facts from the media during a crisis. One way of ensuring open communication with the press during a crisis is to establish a 24-hour-a-day press office, which has the responsibility of providing factual and up-to-date information to the media and employees. Public relations are best handled by one trained person who is named as an official spokesperson and who has skills in dealing with the media. Post-crisis management. After a crisis, a disaster committee should organize follow-up meetings so lessons can be learned and provided in subsequent crisis management efforts. Everyone affected by a crisis must be involved in this process. In addition to managing the learning process, the disaster committee should also turn its attention to recovery. This can be a lengthy and sensitive process that is likely to be influenced by how well a crisis is managed. It may involve challenges such as conducting investigations into causes, mending damaged relationships, reorganizing the project program, settling ongoing disputes, and reassessing project requirements. At the same time, attention must be given to the long-term consequences of a crisis, such as rectifying damage to the environment or dealing with government or legal investigations. Formulating an emergency plan. Formulating an effective emergency plan takes time and depends on advanced planning and the involvement of those who will be affected within and outside an organization. This requires crisis management plans to reflect the continuous changes in project personnel over time, and to invest in training since every change in plan needs to be clearly communicated to those affected. This is best achieved through regular emergency management workshops for everyone and through induction meetings for every new person who enters a project. The complexities, time, and costs involved in doing this are a major barrier to the development of emergency plans on most of the projects. Without a plan, a crisis is likely to stimulate an uncontrollable period of reactionary chaos, which would waste time, resources, and energies, and inevitably lead to the deepening of a crisis. Conclusions. While emergency planning can alleviate many of the potential problems that can arise during the crisis management process, the managers should not over-rely on their crisis management plans as they require continuous maintenance and efforts to ensure that people remain familiar with them. Emergency plans cannot cover all eventualities and can be misinterpreted, ignored, or deliberately distorted during a crisis. And no matter how well designed and heavily resourced emergency plans are, people are both the weakness and strength of an organization during a crisis. While some people will act selfishly, others will exhibit courage, ingenuity, and commitment beyond the call of duty. There is no substitute for good people and responsive management during a crisis. This is the end of this segment of our lesson. In the next segment, we will discuss the role of crisis managers. This course is presented to you by South Europe College. Thank you for listening, and see you on our next segment.